What's the petty dot?
Let everyone in.
Yeah, let's do it. I think that's
Everyone already let in.
Hey, welcome to New York. Augmented reality on the web.
Hello.
There's Barry. Okay, it's official. All right, New York augmented reality. Welcome to New York Augmented Reality Meetup. I'm Andy, and Barry Seth is here with us tonight, and we have some great presenters joining us as well. So thank you for being here. Due to unforeseen events in previous meetups, we've had to lock the attendee video chat and microphone. If you have any comments, questions for the speakers, feel free to write in the chat, Barry, and I will be happy to address. And you could share your thoughts with the whole group that way. So you could use the chat. Let me make sure that's enabled. Chat's working, right, Barry?
Yes, it is. I just sent one out. Hello, everybody.
So this is supposed to be a video. I don't know if it's playing out. Oh, there you go. Maybe. Well, Barry and I worked hard on tonight's event, and we're excited that you're all able to join us. And it's good to see a lot of familiar folks. Thank you, Shuli, for joining after I totally missed out on your art exhibition, but I hope to come visit you soon with my family. Marjorie, good to see you. Rodrigo, Dave, as always, a pleasure. Our agenda tonight, we have Barry Seth to introduce. We have some news, then we go into our presentations, where we'll get to hear from Sander Veenhof, Jason Harrison, Miguel Carrazza, and Bob Crockett. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the co-organizer of the meetup, who I cannot do the events without, Barry Seth, as a child.
Hello there. Thanks everyone for joining, and congratulations, another wonderful episode, and to all the people who've made it through another year of academia, congratulations too.
Amen.
That's
Barry,
about it.
Feel free to put your LinkedIn.
My LinkedIn, yeah, if you want to link into me, yes. The wonderful world of hardware or automotive electronics is my thing right now, but yes. Sure.
Nice. What's the automotive electronic, how's automotive electronics industry looking?
I mean, I think it's doing pretty decently. You know, it's good car sales, so that means, you know, there's more production, so it's a good thing. The used car market, I think, is still tight, but people are designing new cars, lots of EV demand and hybrid, so it's always a good thing.
And heads-up displays, right, and the windshield.
I plead the fifth. I haven't heard anything new about that. We need to have some more people come out and speak about automotive. Sure. Honestly, I've not heard much. So if you'd like to speak on that topic, contact us, please.
Okay, please do. And the latest news, AWE later this month, end of this month, Display Week 2023 tomorrow, Tribeca Immersive next month, June 7th. That's part of the Tribeca Film Festival. They have immersive works. I'll send some links following the intro, so you could check this stuff out. And Jason will be at AWE. I saw that in the chat. App of the week / month, Niantic Peridot. That's their first fully fledged augmented reality game. Pretty neat explorer. I recommend checking it out. Great use of augmented reality in the future of the industry. And then some of the latest funding. Samsung plans to buy OLED micro display developer Imagine, who's spoken at the meetup twice, for about $218 million. Imagia, I spelled that wrong, raised $4.5 million in funding, a lens designer manufacturer. And then MediView for AR medical procedures raised $15 million from investors, including the world famous Mayo Clinic. Also, Google released the Geospatial Creator, a developer tool for Unity and Adobe Aero that enables developers to place augmented reality content through accurate representations of the real world. So here you see the real world, someone's placing content, and then through the phone, they can view that content in the actual location. And now, without further ado, I'm excited to move on to our presentations. Each presenter will have 10 to 15 minutes to talk, followed by a 5-minute Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat, and Barry and I will relay to the speakers at the end of the talk. Now I'm excited to introduce our first speaker, Sander Veenhof, who's been a progressive augmented reality artist in the space for a number of years. He's had his work even been displayed at he held a big initiative at the MoMA, which was super cool and a big point in augmented reality. So super cool to have you here tonight, Sander. I'm really excited to introduce you and hear more about your work.
Thanks a lot for the introduction. Let me click on one more thing here. Share the computer. Sound should be fine. Yeah, I was thinking of a good way to talk about my my previous work in AR and also about the present time, which is very excited. And then I realized that something has changed quite radically compared to when I started creating AR back in 2010. So I thought, okay, let's talk about 5 AR problems that exist now or are going to exist that didn't exist in 2010. And as you just mentioned, yes, indeed, I had a show in the MoMA in New York. It was an uninvited AR show. The MoMA was not involved. We didn't talk to them. They knew nothing about it except for the day before, and they tweeted that they might have an unexpected exhibition. Bruce Sterling did the opening through an avatar that was there, and there were about 30 to 40 artists exhibiting their work all over the place. We spent some time there putting it in place, but that was quite a long time ago, 2010. I still remember the moment when Google Glass was about to launch in 2013, and I'm very impatient. I could not wait for the real device, so I created sort of a do-it-yourself Google Glass. And also still in 2013, it was about objects appearing around you in AR. In this case, yeah, just a random penguin. Nowadays, I'm using this device, the Snap Spectacles. I love it. It's great, and still you can use it to do things in the world around you, like this one. This is a trick that makes you the fastest graffiti writer in the world. It uses hand recognition, and you can yeah, instantly write your name on any wall in a few seconds. I love exploring these kind of real life scenarios for AR. For example, this one. I was just curious what it would be like to have the key on front of my bike, biking around with my AR glasses. So it's this hands-on way of trying out things to find out how our future life will be like. And then of course you run into problems. And problem one, because nowadays it's not only about objects that you see around you, it's about yourself, with all the body tracking functionality. But the problem is you can't see your augmented self, which is a pity. If you perform great tricks in AR here, yeah, you don't get to see yourself, so you just have to guess that you're performance is spectacular. Or when you're, let's say, designing virtual clothes, which is something I explored for a while, abstract clothing, that is. Yeah, you have no clue what you're doing, and in this case, it doesn't really matter so much. Fortunately, if you know your city well,
please look into the mirror to see a manifestation of your augmented self.
Like
use a swiping gesture to change your outfit. Swipe low or high to browse through creations by our community of virtual fashion designers. Get ready for the future. Get ready for 2019, when more augmented reality wearables will hit the market, enabling more people to view your expression.
You're buying. Another solution is, of course, to just put your digital fashion on other people, so at least you know what you're wearing. I've been trying out this this solution with a movable hotspot where you can point at people and they're wearing the thing you're also wearing. Little side step is that instead of seeing yourself augmented with virtual clothes, of course you can also see the real clothes with an augmented view. But then you will have to like the clothes and you're still stuck in this, all the problems you have in the physical world with all these physical clothing. So let's skip that one, but move on to problem number 2. Other people can't see their augmented appearance, which is a pity. For example, this is my daughter, and she's jumping on the trampoline, which is great fun to see. I'm using the replicator Snapchat effect that I created. But she has no clue that I'm seeing this weird manifestation. I've been experimenting with sound, so at least people that are being augmented know what they're doing. So you're pointing your camera at somebody. In this case, there's a certain beep sound when objects grow and when you release them. Could be a solution. But problem number 3, other people can't see your augmented activities. I mean, it's all about this. It's actually a weird situation. You augmenting the world around you, other people, but people have no clue what you're doing. And of course, you can go into the direction of multi-user apps and applications. But so far, it seems like I'm one of the few people in Amsterdam wearing this device in public. So there's not often a multi-user situation. And also, it wouldn't be necessary. I think AR is great because there can be so many parallel realities at one place. But that means that some people might look at you and think you're a bit crazy doing whatever you're doing. So I've been researching this. It's a solution for the problem I just mentioned. This is an interface that works on just very subtle head gestures. So you can move this plane if you practice enough, because it's actually quite tough, but with just tiny little head gestures. So you don't have to be the lunatic that waves his arms or shouts to people or objects that are not really there. And this way you can play with your toy. Although if you want to be more swing tool. Object. Because that brings me to problem number 4. It's very hard to avoid augmenting other people when you're using AR in public space. So all these lab situations, they're fine. You're doing your tests and people know about it. But if you're in public space testing stuff, people have no clue that they're actually interacting with your work. Sometimes it doesn't really matter. Sometimes you actually want them to interact with it. Testing and sort of 2 things: occlusion and also the body tracking in Snap with multiple people. These tourists were the great beta testers, and sometimes go there with a lot of people to test. And especially in places that are crowded, this is going to be a problem you can't avoid. You're in each other's space, but on the other hand, it could also be more fun, right? Compared to the situation we often see in the metro. Nowadays, it's quite disastrous. People are obsessively staring at their phones, which does give me the opportunity to make use of that. So I've been developing sort of a single-player metro games where I'm playing. In this case, there's not much gameplay, but this cube moves from person to person. And people in the metro have no clue that I'm doing this because they're staring at the smartphone anyway. And I think I here solved the problem that if you're filming people in public space, if you make them, yeah, if you mask them, then that should be fine. And these masks would also be more sophisticated. This is, yeah, I'm not a 3D modeler. I don't have that skills. Not having the time to get better, but making a sort of doing a remake of the Triadisches ballet. That's about the skill level I have. And it's fun. So when I'm waiting at a bus stop, people in front of me perform the Triadisches ballet. And I think still this is, privacy-wise, this is okay. Sort of not recognizable. Playing a shop. Again, filter that uses NPCs, non-playable characters, and the other thing in the shop. The game is that you have to try to avoid being looked at. If you are being stared at, it's -1. You can only lose points, you can't score points. So you have to do this in a sneaky way and subtle, so people don't stare at you. It's also a really fun game as a multi-user game, by the way. Great for company events and things like that. Almost the last one, but also bit similar. What I would also like to test with these things what's the boundary? When is it okay or when not? In this case, you're actually, yeah, you're making those people not recognizable, but you're stalking them with your phone in your hand. And especially if you post these kind of things on Reddit, you really get very honest and very clear reactions on what people think is okay and what's not. But for me, it's about finding the right point between saying no to everything and saying yes to everything. There should be some middle way, and it's fun to try that out. And for example, this one already, of course, people said, well, it's never okay to film kids. And I was really having fun with my daughter using the look. So that brings me to the last and final problem, the high expectations. People expect so much from AR these days, and there needs to be a killer app. It needs to be functional. It needs to be perfect. And I would say, well, it's the ultimate place to just play and be free to create whatever you want to create. So I would say, yeah, stop pointing the phone at yourself. Stop making all these face filters that are fun for about 3 seconds, but turn the phone around, point to the world around you, and make that an exciting place to be. And if I have 1 minute of time left, and I need to see a nod from somebody, then there's one final thing. Nowadays, everybody.
You are riding a bike. Why?
AI. So compared to
I'm on my way to a meeting.
The least functional creation. This is maybe
You are on the ferry. Why?
The proof one. And so
I'm not in a hurry.
Train my own personalized AI, and I think, yeah, we can't even imagine what this is going to.
You're not stopping for a coffee at this highly recommended coffee
AI
place.
device.
Why?
It's going to watch us while we're doing.
You are having a meeting
all the time.
Why?
This goes way beyond the. We have.
You are holding 6 bananas.
Days.
Why?
Again, I think.
I am going to buy these bananas.
It's a sort of a hands-on attempt to fix it yourself.
You need fruit, but you are looking at flowers. Why?
Anyway, so far,
You are looking.
that was it. And now I think there's a few minutes for comments, remarks, and skip the Reddit remarks. I've read them on Reddit. That's fine, but maybe there are some comments from you guys.
Well, that was excellent. I have a question just to start it off, and then I'll pass it over to Barry. How do you come up with all the various ideas? I mean, they're unique and highly creative. So I'm wondering if you can give some more insight on your process there.
Yeah, well, I think the starting point is usually it's myself thinking, hey, if I would be wearing an AR wearable today, right now, going somewhere, what would I want to see? What would I want to do? And I'm not a passive consumer. I'm not waiting for the right app to be created for me. That's the flexibility that I see with all these tools that are so accessible, that you can just make it yourself.
Hey, Barry, sorry, Barry, you're not on mute.
Yeah, I know. I have children here. I'm not able to block them out augmented in a augmented way. So I apologize for that, guys. If you can build me an app for that, Sander, would help.
All right.
I don't have the space. Anyway, apologies. So yeah, it's amazing. It's totally cool stuff. Like, what is your most, I don't know, like, what's your most popular app? Like, any of these like that are gaining traction in certain parts of the world, like, what is the biggest app that you've made so far?
I don't know. I mean, I'm using these snaps. I'm creating these snap filters, and at the moment I'm the biggest, like the foremost user of them. So I'm having fun with them, and then when I've done an experiment, I move on to the next one. So I'm not spending a lot of time, making them perfect and very user friendly. So I actually, I don't know. What I do know is that when I for example, launch them for groups and I'm there, it's really fun to play the Mario game. Like, that's a recent one. And the stupid filter that I created, the face flipper, unfortunately, that was my most viewed LinkedIn post. So I've been making serious attempts to move AR, the whole domain, forward since 2010, and then I post this one, and it was my like the most popular one. So yeah, I'm not so much into making popular things. It's
you do it for yourself. You're a true artist, but I mean, obviously, you're able to pay the bill, so I mean, it's amazing. Okay, so I got some questions over here from the audience. Greg asked, so many distractions. When you need to pay attention to that truck, which will soon might go out, is there any way of rapidly exiting from the clutter?
If there's going to be too much around you, you mean?
I mean, this is from Greg. I mean, he's welcome to I think he's saying, you know, like, it's just a world has so many stimuli coming in that, you know, did you send a reply to that?
Yeah.
There's so much stimuli coming in. So how do you get the real world, make sure that you're aware of the real world while you're, focusing on your app, or your AR experience?
Actually, I've also been doing some tests there that I think that the device should divide your heads-up display in multiple zones, and there should be a sort of automatic system that frees certain zones automatically when it's needed. So when you're on the bike, some areas should not be available. I think this is also one of the things we need when we really start using this device all day long. Definitely, clutter is horrible. I'm from the Netherlands, so we bike a lot, and that's actually I
almost was killed probably 5 times when I was in Eindhoven. It's crazy.
Yeah. And when you're biking and all at the same time interacting with AR, but I've found some ways, for example, to not have the menu stick in front of your face, but to keep it repeating, like within the space you're in. So it appears 10 meters away from you. You go there, and then it appears again and again. So all these things, it helps to solve it by just trying it out and see what doesn't work, and then the fix it's clear to see.
Cool. Now here we got another one for you. We got several that you have time for. How much is the device important to you? For example, if a new piece of technology such as eye tracking comes out to you, do you work to better understand these new technologies, and also probably haptics and other aspects that will make the experience even better? I see you have a lot of audio there. I was curious about spatial audio, but so how much is it inherent with the device, and then all the other features that are on there, like Do you
Yeah.
make an experience based upon the device, like the Snap? You said you're using Snap, right? The Snap device
Yes.
currently? Okay.
Well, it's actually two. I think it's actually one thing that it's important for me that I want to be able to imagine what the device would do in like normal circumstances, to create a sort of a lab proof of concept. That's not so much of my interest. I liked it when the mobile phone first had the first AR apps that meant that everybody anywhere could be using your AR creations, which is very powerful. So that's what I was exploring then. And what I'm now exploring is that especially this spectacle, it's so lightweight and people don't find it weird when I wear it outside. And that was different with the HoloLens, for example. That's a bulky thing. People look at you in a weird way when you walk around in public space. So you can't actually test that. So what I like, it's not so much the technology, because I find my ways around when there's limitations, but it's more the practical use that's important for me from a device. And haptics, if you mention haptics, I don't think I want to be sitting in a metro with two like robotic gloves and then interact with things. I think, that's not the right place for that one. So I'm
right. We'll hear what the other guys have to say. Yeah, there's probably a time and a place for each of these different new things as they come out. Okay, we got another one. We have a comment. Not my comment, but I have to agree. Love the combination of playfulness and utility. It feels like it really encourages one to engage with the world around them in novel ways, which is amazing. I'm not sure if that's what you're going for, but that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, that's what I like about AR, that it's actually really helping you to be present in the world around you. So that's definitely a comment I also agree with.
Definitely, yeah. As I walk into my house and all my kids are on devices. So yes, I'm totally with you there. Okay, so I think we have at least one more. What's the feeling of an AR work versus something that is physical experience?
I see so. There's just one thing you cannot really do. I mean, you can't feel it in such a way that you can't feel touch, but you can feel an AR work as well. It can be there. It can be, you can be emotional about the things you see and that are exciting. So I don't see a lot of big differences, except that with AR, there's so much flexibility. The fact that you can create something in a day and that there's no limit to the amount of materials you need. Back in the days in 2010, I created an artwork that was across the whole world. It was about a few billion cubes all over the place. I mean, that could never have been created physically. So it just gives these new opportunities. And but what I do like is that it's very much connected to the physical space, that it's there to share with people around you. And that's an added value. It goes both ways. It's for AR, it's good that there's this physical area, and for the physical reality, it's great that it can be enhanced with virtual enhancements.
Definitely awesome. Is it hard to create augmented artwork as a pioneer?
Last question.
Yeah. No, it's not so much. It's not hard. It's actually what I really love to do, because when you do things when the whole world is still having doubt whether to join it or not, that means that there's also this freedom. Right now, it's getting harder because the as I said, the expectancies are very high. People expect a lot, and they expect a whole team to work on things, and but I think it's important to also keep an eye open for these weird minimalistic creations, because they can be pure and they can be addressing an essential thing, and just that, not so much more. There's no score counter, not whatever. So and I think it's even an important role to be playing that, to move in this space, not as a business, not as a scientist, but just as a like a sort of a weird inventor with art as a good as a proper explanation why you're doing things.
Well said. Thank you, Sander, for joining us. It was great having you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me.
Thank you. Really cool work. Barry, if you want to post the website on the chat, I could do that as well. I'll pull it up in a minute. Thanks again, Sander. Let me see here. Awesome. Next up, excited to have Jason Harrison here for a Unity demo, which is a unique spin on the meetup, and really great for this format. Jason's been in tech for over 25 years, mostly as a developer. He's a Unity certified expert and a certified instructor. Currently, he's managing a team of developers for Zeal, codingzeal.com. You can check it out, and also creating mixed reality educational content in Unity. So yeah, we're really excited to have you here, Jason. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is really cool. And now I'm worried because you said this is a unique spin, but we're going to work in Unity for a minute. hopefully people are able to see what we're going to do here.
We follow along, or that's not a good idea.
I would say not to try, because I'm going to be opening a project that I already have open.
Okay.
That you don't have, but let me share my screen here. So yeah, as Andy mentioned, I mostly talk about Unity, and lately I talk a lot about Unity XR simulation. So if you've been doing any kind of Unity for a while, you've probably heard of the device simulator. This is not the same thing. This is actually a feature of the latest version of AR Foundation, which is the AR library that Unity puts out, that lets you quite literally simulate augmented reality right in the editor. I'm using my mouse to control the direction here that I'm turning, and then my keyboard to move around. And if you've ever done any Unity AR, you recognize what I'm doing here. I'm detecting a plane, which, I sort of consider this kind of the hello world of Unity AR projects. And I'm doing it in this simulated warehouse factory situation. And once I have that plane, I can then drop an object on it, just like I would if I was outside or inside in a space in my house. And then I can select that object and I can move it around. And in this case, I actually have a little bit of extra functionality attached to it that detects its distance from other detected planes. So if I go over here and I actually scan this little section over here of this box, then I can slide over here, move this around again, and it detects its distance. And in this case, the green line means that it's square with those planes. And if I rotate it just a little bit, the line turns black to let me know it's not square. So the cool thing about this is that I've created this whole thing, and yeah, it's not, not super high tech. It's somewhat rudimentary as far as AR goes, but I didn't have to put it on my device at all to test any of it. And yet all I have to do is build it and put it on my device, and I could drop that crate anywhere in my house, slide it around with my fingers. I can detect the planes of my walls, and it would then tell me the distance from those walls. And by the way, this box does have, I call these whiskers, these little lines. It does have whiskers on all of its edges. So if I rotate enough, you can see it shoots out the other side. So that's XR simulation. And with that, you can do a lot. Like you can basically create, all sorts of things. Imagine this is, a video game. You're going to drop some units. You're going to drop some, structures, things like that. And then you can move them around. You can prototype the whole thing right here in the editor. Now this is pretty basic functionality. But if you have an iOS device that's a Pro version, you also have a LiDAR sensor built in, and this simulation tool can also simulate LiDAR detected meshes. So you would have curves and other edge detection that you don't have when you're just detecting planes like this. So that's like, sort of in a nutshell, that's kind of the basics. But some of the other cool things you can do with this, for example, is you can go in here and you can change the environment. So when you have this version of AR Foundation, which is version 5 or greater, then you have all these different environments that you can simulate. So you have a living room here. So if you're making AR for a particular space, if it's outdoor, you've got a backyard thing here. If it's indoor, if it's kitchen based AR, you've got a kitchen here, and you saw there were a few variations of kitchen, and usually they're different sizes and dimensions. So you can create all sorts of augmented reality programs and applications in Unity in the editor using these simulated environments. Super cool. And you can also create your own. So it's kind of hard to tell from this angle, but what I just loaded up is a scan that I made of a room in my house. So I used the program Polycam to scan this space here. And you can see here the exact same thing that was happening in the other room, in the other space is happening here, detecting all the planes, walls, couches, all the things. And of course, if I want to, I can drop my crate in here too. So it all works the same. So this simulation environment can be whatever you want it to be. It's actually very simple to create. If we go to my prefabs project, prefabs demo. So this is the loft environment we just looked at. And again, if you've done any kind of Unity work, you already know what a prefab is, but it's an object that basically you can use in Unity in lots of different ways. But in this case, this is a special prefab that is used to give us our simulated environment. And so all I did, again, is I scanned this room using Polycam. And if you haven't used Polycam or scanned a space into 3D, that's something I recommend you try because it's kind of fun. And yeah, it's not, the resolution is not like awesome, but it's good enough for what we're using it for, which is to simulate the environment, right? So I scanned this object, and it's just a single 3D object. And then to make it work as a simulation environment, I just had to add this simulation environment component, which is just something that's part of AR Foundation. So you don't have to write any special code. You don't have to do anything special. You don't have to tell Unity you're in the editor or you're not in the editor. It doesn't have any extra special code that makes it know how to do this. Unity has provided all of that code just in this one component. And then this white box here that you see surrounding it is the camera movement bounds. So again, because we want to simulate something real-ish, we don't want the camera to just be able to go wherever we want. We want it to stick in the space. So we create these bounds here to, to say here, the camera can stay within this space. And then we have, of course, why would Unity not want to reload? Of course it does. And then we have the camera starting pose. So this cyan colored shape right here is the camera. And if you wanted to, adjust it in some way, say I wanted to start it in the other corner, I would just need to, slide it around, although not so abruptly. Do something like this, and then rotate it, something like that. And now if I go back and start it up again, we should start up in the corner, standing on the couch. And yes, here we are. So here we are, sitting on the couch, right where we put the camera. So you have that control over how you want, the thing to start. So again, if you're making a game or something like that, you might have specific requirements for how you want that to happen. Now, the thing you might be noticing if you're watching my screen is that I keep tapping these two buttons over here, enable touch simulation and disable touch simulation. Now, this is a little script that I wrote that I attached to my AR session here. And the reason that I did this is because, a couple of reasons. One, in order for Unity to know that I want to drop something on this space, what I'm telling Unity is that I'm simulating the touch of my screen. So I need Unity to know my intention is to be touching my screen when I click the mouse. So that's why this button is labeled enable touch simulation. I disable the simulation of touch when what I want to do is move around, because that simulates me just walking around my space holding my phone. So we're not simulating anything being touched in that scenario. So I have those to toggle back and forth. Now, if I didn't have this little script here, this is reason number 2, I would have to be using this other thing, window, analysis, input debugger, and then I'd have to be toggling this thing on and off right here under this options. Now, I did dock it right here, so it makes it a little bit easier, but I wanted to add this script because for me, it's just one click instead of I got to click the drop down and then I click this, so then I can just toggle them back and forth. So that's why that has to be there. Now, what makes all of this work? A couple of things. One is if we go into the package manager here, we do have to have the new Unity input system. Let's see, in project. So we got to be using the new Unity input system. Otherwise, the touch simulation is not going to work. The other thing we have here is AR Foundation. So again, if you're not familiar with AR Foundation, it's basically a library that creates sort of a common approach to augmented reality that under the hood translates to iOS or to Android behavior as necessary when you build it to the appropriate device. So, AR Foundation provides you kind of a common interface to those two things and then handles the rest of the work under the hood. And then the other piece is XR Interaction Toolkit. And this is what makes it possible for us to, without writing any code, be able to drop objects in the scene, again, simulate, but also press our finger onto the object and move it around, and even rotate it and scale it or make it smaller or bigger using a pinch gesture. That's all due to XR Interaction Toolkit. So if you have XR Interaction Toolkit and AR Foundation 5 or greater, you can reproduce most of what I just showed you, obviously with your own objects, without writing any code. And I'll show you kind of how that all comes together real fast. I don't know how much time I have, but hopefully a little bit. Couple of things. Let's see. Let's look at our, so you might notice here, my scene doesn't have hardly anything in it. It has nothing in it, in fact, because everything happens within the simulation. So there's not a whole lot to see in the scene. But what makes this all work is a couple of things. One of the things I have in my scene is this game object that says placement interactable. And you can see I have one component attached to that called AR placement interactable. The two important things about this, and again, you don't have to write any code to do this. None of the things I've showed you require any code other than the whiskers. I wrote that code. But this placement prefab is exactly like it sounds. It's the thing you want to be placed into your scene when you press either on your screen or when you click your mouse on a detected plane. And then next field down, fallback layer mask, is the layer that your planes are going to be assigned. So in my case, it's called planes. And then you would just, assign it to whatever yours is. So that component by itself handles you dropping things into the scene without, again, any extra effort. And then if we open up that prefab, which is this one. Let me kind of move out a little bit just to look around. We see here a couple of components. So this is this top level game object here is going to provide a little bit of what we need, but mostly it's just to kind of contain the rest of the game objects. But there's two components here that do the heavy lifting of moving and selecting. So the first one is the AR selection interactable. And again, this is another component that is simply a part of XR Interaction Toolkit. I didn't create this, it's just part of the system already. So I add that on there, and that's what makes it possible for me to click it and select it. And then the next one down is the AR Translation Interactable, again, just part of the XR Interaction Toolkit. That one is the one that when the thing is selected, lets me slide it around, okay? So if you've moved an object in Unity, you're probably familiar with what translation means, but in Unity vernacular, that means move it. And the extra interesting bit about the selection interactable is this selection visualization right here. And this, as you can see here, is a disabled component, a disabled game object in my hierarchy. If I enable it, this might look familiar because this is what the box looks like when I select it. So this is a game object that you can use to say, what do I want to appear when I've selected this thing? And it could be, in my case, it's simply a cube that's a little bit bigger, that has a material that's somewhat transparent so that you can kind of still see your original object. It doesn't need to be a cube. It could have been, you know, a capsule that appears above the box. It could be whatever I want it to be. But in this case, I just made it simple and made it that that cube that's slightly larger. So it stays disabled. And then when you assign it here as your selection visualization element, then Unity knows automatically to enable that thing when you've selected it and to disable that thing when you've deselected it or when you've selected something else. So again, you can do all of this without writing any code, just a couple of game objects assigned in the right place to the right thing. And in fact, if this is something you want to play with, again, I don't have a device connected to my computer at all. I'm simply running all of this within the editor. You don't need to build it to any device to test this. You don't need to even tell Unity that you intend to build it to any particular platform. It'll just run regardless. So if you wanted to try this, I actually created a GitHub repo that's available for your use. The easiest way to get there is probably from my simple website, JasonSpatial.com. There's a button on that page that takes you to the AR GitHub repo. It's actually a template repo, which is a little different thing. But basically, the directions are in the README. So hopefully it's pretty straightforward. If not, feel free to connect with me and reach out, and I'm happy to help. I have walked more than one person through getting that set up because they weren't super familiar with Git or GitHub and those kinds of things. So so that's something you can try out there. Let's see.
We're almost at time.
Great. I just want to show you on that. I'm going to go back in there real fast. The only other thing I want to show you is if you do want to scale or rotate. Now, these require 2-finger pinch maneuvers, and Unity doesn't have a way to simulate that in the editor. But once you have this all kind of set up and working the way you want it to, you can go down here to add component, and you can add the AR rotation interactable and the AR scale interactable. And this object is now fully activated for rotating and scaling using 2-finger gestures without me doing anything else. So again, this is a kind of a whirlwind tour. I did do a LinkedIn Live on this exact same thing, going in a little more depth for about an hour the other day. So you can check my LinkedIn if you wanted to rewatch that video. But yeah, that's kind of the gist, and I'd love to take some questions.
Awesome. That was great. Thank you, Jason. That was really, really neat. And those tools seem pretty cool. I never knew about some of them. So thank you for sharing. Ara wants to know, is it Polycam? Is that 3D model? Going back to your project. Is that 3D model corresponding to the actual scale of room and object?
That's a good question. I haven't actually measured, but I would say yes. So that crate that I dropped down when we did the demo just now, I'm pretty sure is 1 meter cubed. And the place I was dropping it on is not quite 2 meters. So I would say it was pretty accurate. Yeah.
Amazing. Rodrigo wants to know, could you import CAD files in case you want to interact something designed in a CAD software?
Great question. So by default, Unity wants to import things from Blender and other sort of 3D tools, not specifically CAD, but Unity definitely does a lot of work with a lot of industry folks who are using CAD programs. So I know that there's a path. I don't think it's a default path. Like, I don't think you could simply drag a CAD file, and it would depend on the CAD file itself as well. Like, I know I've been talking to some folks about using some of their tools. They're doing 3D modeling of physical products, and those have to have some sort of middleman translate. So yeah, it depends, but you can certainly Google that, whether it works or not, but not all of them do.
Thank you. Next question is Unity a better platform to start out with versus Lens Studio?
I can't speak for Lens Studio, and it kind of depends on what your goal is. So I use Unity for a couple of reasons. One is that it supports literally every device that you could possibly ever want to deploy to, and is working very closely with every device manufacturer. So pretty much anybody that comes out with a new device will already have a Unity integration when they release that device. So if your intention is to have diversity in where you can deploy to, I would say Unity is my first choice anyway. Whether it's easier to get up and running than Lens Studio, though, probably not. Though I would say one of the things I didn't talk about, but Unity does have a visual scripting approach as well. So if you're not a coder, for example, there is some drag and drop ways of creating things in Unity, which is maybe a little bit closer to Lens Studio. But again, for me, it's the deployment platform options that make Unity my choice.
So what are some platforms you could deploy to? You could do to the iPhone, Android. What else could you build for?
HoloLens. I mean, the Vario, anything from HTC. I mean, pretty much every VR headset ever made. A lot of and these days, a lot of specialty devices. So if anyone here is familiar with RealWear, that's a sort of head-mounted system that runs on an Android platform. So again, you're still just doing an Android deploy, but with RealWear's libraries in Unity. So yeah, a lot of the devices, even if they are from different manufacturers under the hood, for example, I'm pretty sure all of the standalone VR these days is going to be on Android. So, Nice.
Amazing. We have a bunch of questions. I just want to run through these questions.
Sure.
Jonathan wants to know, have you found a way to recreate the real world lighting conditions easily in the editor simulator for the real world space that you want to deploy? And then secondly, related to this, is there a way to simulate in the editor camera how a real world model or a smartphone will actually perform in the environment?
So two answers, I guess. The first one is the simulator does have what's called environment probes, which do try to simulate lighting conditions. So let me say this. If you set the lighting conditions in the editor to match your intended target, the environment probes can then use that lighting condition appropriately. But it is kind of up to you to kind of set what that condition might be. And I'm sorry, remind me the second question.
The second is, could you simulate camera movement, like the smartphone camera, how it's going to move in the environment?
So all of the things that you saw me do are I don't know if I'm answering the right question, because what I was doing by flying around was simulating me moving with my device. That's why those planes were being detected as I moved. That's the same thing that would happen if I moved in my space. So I don't know if that answers the question, but
maybe Jonathan, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe he's saying could you simulate a person holding a phone walking around the space versus just in the editor moving the camera freely?
so sort of animating that on your own.
Yeah, maybe. Like, is
Pausing.
that right?
So like if I wanted to say, I'm going to create a situation where a person is going to move from point A to point B, and I don't want to control it. I just want to have it happen.
Correct.
Yeah. So you could use an animation track in Unity for that.
That was not the question. The question from Jonathan is whether the device has LiDAR or not.
The simulated device effectively does have LiDAR in the sense that as you walk around, it will create a LiDAR expected mesh in your environment. But that's up to you. So you control that. So I didn't show it to you, but in my hierarchy, I have meshing and I have plane detection, and I enable one or the other depending on what I expect my device target to be. So if I know it's going to be a mesh capable device, I'll enable meshing. If I think it's going to be not a mesh enabled device, I'll enable plane detection.
Nice. Cool. Let me see what else I have here. Oh, yep, you answered. We got the question.
Awesome.
Is AR Foundation hard to set up?
No. I mean, it depends on what you mean by setup, but literally it's you go to that window where it says package manager, and you install it. And it's after that, it's pretty straightforward. Again, I have an hour-long video on LinkedIn about kind of starting it up from scratch. So feel free to check that out.
Nice.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of folks who've expressed interest in learning Unity and whatnot, but what would be the best way for them to like keep in touch with you, or what's the best method?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things. Again, my website is JasonSpatial.com.
I'll post that.
My LinkedIn, there's a button there to connect with me on LinkedIn. There's a button to join my mailing list. I also am about ready to launch, and you are all the first people to hear about it, a little sort of group coaching program at letsbuildxr.com. Feel free to check that out if you're interested. It's going to be free for this first go around. So, manage your expectations. But I want to see what I can do to help more people who want to get started with Unity and really create a habit of putting in a little bit of effort every day. So keep their expectations manageable.
Thank you for joining us. I just posted your link and your website link in the chat.
Awesome.
Well.
Yeah. And my email is there too. So anyone, feel free to connect with me however you feel like.
And that link, the new course that you're starting, definitely, if you wanted to add that as well, that'd be great. Or if it's going to be on your website too, that could be cool. Would definitely love to learn more about that. Sweet. Oh, cool. Let's build XR.com. Okay, amazing. Yep. Thank you so much, Jason, for joining us.
Yeah, for sure. Happy to do it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Awesome. Barry Seth. How are you hanging in there, Barry?
How you doing? Doing well. I wish I had an AR helper for math homework, but we'll talk about that one later.
Yeah, Jason can make you one maybe. All right. And until then, we have Miguel Morales joining us. He's he runs the extended reality at Abbott Laboratories, and it's really exciting to have you here, Miguel, and learn more about your work. Thanks for joining.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. That. Perfect. All right. Can everyone see my screen and see the presentation? All right. Awesome. So again, thank you all. Thank you, Andy and Barry, for inviting me. Like I mentioned, I lead the extended reality group at Abbott Labs. And if you don't know much about Abbott, we're really a pretty large multinational healthcare and health tech company. And the project in particular that I'm here to talk to you guys about is a project that we created for blood donation. So Abbott has been involved with blood donation since the 1980s, when we were the first company to create a test for HIV. And we've really continued that tradition. And so it's really an area that we've been very, very passionate about. And so we were looking for solutions and working with industry partners to see how we could create a real sustainable blood supply for the United States moving into the future, and what it would really take to do that. And one of the solutions that we came up with was a mixed reality solution. So I'll actually go ahead and play a video before I get into it.
I see how important it is to encourage the younger generation to begin their donation process and to become recurrent donors.
The first folks to use mixed reality experience when they were getting blood, some of the feedback, 90% said they had a positive experience, and 94% said they were likely to donate again using the mixed reality technology.
It's cool to make blood donation cool. It makes it interesting. It reduces the fear that comes along with blood donation.
The critical blood shortage that's happening now and seems to happen more and more frequently. I think anything to enhance the donor experience is a good thing.
This is definitely a way to get more people, not only people in general, but also younger people to donate blood.
Awesome. Well, all right. So as you guys saw, what we did here was really try to create a first of its kind mixed reality experience that would allow us to improve on the blood donation experience, which really had not changed for so long. And that was because we realized that one of the biggest problems that was affecting the blood supply and the transfusion industry was that young people were not donating blood. So the average age of a blood donor in the United States is 55. And in the last 10 years, the number of people, what we call Gen Z, so like 18 to 25, that have donated blood has actually gone down by about 30%. So this is a problem that is here and is kind of getting worse. And so we needed to find ways to address that. And so what we did was we created this mixed reality experience that allowed you to actually plant a garden using your eyes as you are donating blood. And I'll get a little bit into why we made those decisions and why that's what we built. But this is something that we launched at CES in January, as you saw. Since then, we've been working on a medical study, which has actually been completed to actually look at how this affects the levels of anxiety and needle phobia in donors. And then now we're actually going to be launching it commercially in New York, Chicago, Houston, and I think Ohio as well in June, which is actually when World Blood Donor Day is, in case you weren't aware. So like I keep mentioning, this was really all about the donor experience, and we needed to improve the donor experience. And so one of our mantras as we started developing this was, this was not a technology problem, this was an experience problem. And so we really needed to come at this from a user experience perspective, not a XR perspective. And what that meant was really digging deep and diving into the design thinking approach, where the core of it was, and the most important task was gaining that deep empathy for the blood donor and for the phlebotomist, who is the person that actually takes your blood. And so again, the first phase of the design thinking process is to gain that empathy. But what we realized, and if you've gone through this process, you'll know that it's a really iterative process. And we actually had to go through this sort of 3 times. So we did all this market research. we talked to all these people and we realized, okay, the key problem here is the donor experience. Young people are not excited to come donate. They don't resonate with the messaging. They get a billion text messages from the Red Cross every day telling them, come donate, and it just doesn't sink through it, right? So we first had to realize that the donor experience was the problem. But then, it was, what do we do about it? So we had about 19 different ideas about what we could do to improve the donor experience. We eventually settled on mixed reality. Why mixed reality? Well, a few things is it actually started as virtual reality. But the problem with virtual reality is actually in the form factor of the device. The phlebotomist, the main thing that they rely on to monitor the donor and to ensure that they're not having an adverse effect is their eyes. And so having a headset that actually covers their eyes was a deal breaker for the phlebotomist. And in case, you may see other tries at this, blood donation problem using extended reality, they were limited to using it before the donation because, of those same concerns. The other thing is, of course, we were very worried about donor safety. So if someone is in virtual reality, they of course tend to forget they're in virtual reality. They may try to stand up, get dizzy, all things that lead to terrible results if you have a needle in your arm. And so all of this really led us to believe that, okay, mixed reality was the right solution. But then we were left with the question of, okay, what the heck does someone want to do in mixed reality while they're donating blood? There's not exactly a lot of things that we can go back on and kind of use as a benchmark. So we again went back for a third time, did a lot more user interviews, and we realized that what we needed to rely on was eye tracking. So obviously when someone's donating blood, their arm is occupied using the traditional controllers for virtual reality, very difficult. But using a device like the Microsoft HoloLens, we could actually take advantage of eye tracking and make the entire experience just controlled with someone's eyes, making it much more comfortable for a blood donor. The other thing we realized is we did a lot of research and a lot of tests to find, what was the right theme for the experience? What did we want to do? And again, with that goal of reducing the anxiety, reducing needle phobia, and creating a soothing experience, we ended up, settling on that nature theme and planting a garden. So then once we started to ideate, the other thing that became important was not just to look at the workflow or the experience of the donor, but we also had to do the service design of looking at how is this going to affect the workflow of the phlebotomist, right? So while we're trying to use this to entice people to come in and donate blood, the important thing is not this experience, right? The blood donation is the important part. And so we need to ensure that, even if they're having fun in the experience and it's all going well and smooth, we're not affecting the actual blood donation, and we're not making the phlebotomist's job any harder. And so we did a lot of research, a lot of shadowing, and we went to a lot of different blood centers to try and figure out from the application design, what can we do to ensure that this is not affecting the phlebotomist's workflow? And I'll talk a little bit in a second about how we did that. And then, of course, we had to really prototype and test this, extensively. I wish I would have known about this Unity tool that Jason just presented, because one of the big problems that we ran into was how do you test this in different types of environments in a systematic and automatic way, right? There's all sorts of different types of blood centers, which is something I learned. There's some that are very large, beautiful environments with lots of natural light and all glass, right? Which everyone thinks is beautiful, but I think this group understands how terrifying that is. If you're in a mixed reality application, glass, not great. But then also, there's some places that are very small, they're very cramped, they don't have a lot of light, they have a lot of different cluttered substances that are changing, and so the spatial maps are changing. So we really had to make sure we were iterating quickly. We were testing this a lot in a lot of different environments so that we could get to what we wanted to get the experience, or what we wanted the experience to be, particularly on the eye tracking side, because again, we were doing something that, per Microsoft had never been done before. And Microsoft was an important partner in getting through all this, but there had never been an application that had been controlled fully via eye tracking from start to finish for a consumer. And again, if you are not very familiar with a HoloLens, I'll kind of put it up so hopefully you can see it. On the nose bridge of a HoloLens, I'm doing a very bad job. There are two cameras. these cameras are what allow you to actually track each individual eye rather than the position of the head or the movement of the head. And that's what we had to work with and sort of develop and iterate on in order to get the full eye tracking experience. And so we had to get a little clever with it, which I'll talk about in a second. But we did about 14 iterations, actually 28 in total, but we did about 14 iterations before we got to something that we thought was actually usable. And then I went and actually very proudly was the first person that I know of to donate blood using mixed reality to really test this in the field. We then did another 14 iterations. And then we finally felt like, okay, this thing is tested, it's iterated well, performing to the point where we can actually put it in front of donors. And so amazingly, this entire process that you see here from start to finish took almost exactly a year. So we did our first workshop in November or December of 2021. And the first event that we did with blood donors was December 17th, 2022 in New York. And it was at a blood center in Brooklyn, where we again tested this with the first 20 real donors and got some really amazing feedback. So 90% of the donors said that they had a very positive experience using mixed reality, and 85% said that it was extremely or very easy to use. And most importantly, 94% said they were very likely to come back and donate again using mixed reality. And so this was the first 20 donors, but like I mentioned, since then, we did a medical study with, I believe it was about 400 donors. And we'll be publishing the results of that later this year. So hopefully I can come back and show you guys the results of that, but there were good results. Just for this group, I also wanted to get a little bit into what were some of the technical innovations that we had to do in order to make this thing happen or make it work. So the first thing was the eye tracking, like I mentioned. So being able to do tracking from the individual eye movement was very important because we also wanted to minimize head movement in order to minimize the possibility of dizziness. And so again, being able to track each individual eye, find the position where the user is looking, and make that accurate enough on a spatial map was quite difficult. We also had to look at the spatial maps themselves because we wanted the experience to be immersive in a way where it really felt like the garden was growing into the environment, which meant that we wanted the flowers to grow in the correct orientation of where they were being planted. Meaning that we had to build a system to really understand, is this a wall? Is this a floor? Is this a tabletop? Is this a ceiling? And then adjust how we were growing. Because again, when the user plants the flower, they plant a seed, which then over time animates and grows into a flower. And so if the user plants it on a ceiling, we can't have it grow into the ceiling. It needs to grow downwards. Same thing with if a user plants it on the ground, it needs to grow up, but it needs to understand if part of the flower is on the leg of a table and not grow into the table, right? So it needs to have that object avoidance as well within the spatial mapping. So that is something that took us quite a while to get correctly in making sure that regardless of how the environment was, how bumpy it was, we were refining those spatial maps and doing that semantics to be able to understand where they were. And the last thing was, we actually noticed something very interesting as we went through the experience is that what happened if you were a donor that wanted to try the mixed reality, but once you got into it, realized you couldn't really figure out the eye tracking, right? You couldn't figure out how to take the seeds and plant them on the walls or how to get that done. Well, we didn't want you to have a terrible experience, and we definitely didn't want you having to ask the phlebotomist a million questions to get you to help them. And so what we realized was we needed to have another entity within mixed reality that could be guiding the donor on what to do and helping to fill their environment if they so chose, or if they chose that they didn't really want to interact with it. So that's why we created an avatar named Willow within the experience. But Willow is quite special in that she can actually plant the whole garden for the donor. And so she's a little Siri-looking ball that sits in space, and she's able to actually fly to a central point in space, which is the bag of seeds, and then figure out an open spot on the walls that has no overlaid objects, has no other flowers built into it, or sorry, already planted, and fly over to that space and plant it. And of course, if a phlebotomist is walking in Willow's way, Willow will do the object avoidance to make sure she doesn't fly through them. So all of these things together were quite difficult and required us to really build in a lot of the AI, again, not to make it technically impressive or anything, but just because we needed to make sure that we had that user experience as nailed down as possible. So where are we going from here? Like I mentioned, we're launching it in a few markets in Ohio on June 14th, but we'll be continuing to roll it out throughout the US in 2023. And then we are looking beyond the US. So we're starting here in the US, but there's already some markets that have shown interest and want to expand there. So Taiwan and Singapore are two early ones, but I know there's more in Latin America and Europe. And then we're also looking to expand the application. So both the experiences and the applications. Right now, like I mentioned, it's very much a garden experience. You plant a garden, you plant seeds with your eyes. But we want a donor to come in and have a whole library of experiences that they can pick from, whether it be, mixed reality fishing or, whatever it may be. We don't want them to be limited to just the garden experiences. So we'll be continuing to develop more applications, and we work very closely with Microsoft. So just like we did kind of a showing off of the eye tracking capabilities for the garden experience, we'll be showing off a lot of the new Microsoft tools with our next experiences. We're also looking to expand the applications of this to beyond people that are donating blood. So, phlebotomist training is a big area. I think a lot of people here know that training is a key capability of mixed reality. So this is helping to introduce mixed reality to that industry. But we're also looking at, sort of the other side. So there's people that give blood, but then there's people that have to receive the blood on a weekly basis. So kids that have leukemia or other types of cancer care that need to receive transfusions every week. How can we also use these tools or this technology to also increase or improve their experience and much more. So this is just a start, and hoping we can come back and talk to you about all the great results it has had later this year.
Wow. Amazing.
Awesome
amazing
initiative.
work. Yeah, amazing stuff. Yeah, we have a lot of questions for you. Thank you so much. Okay, so one Shuli had about, based upon the relaxation of the donor, have you seen if the quality of the blood is any better? I mean, have you done any studies, or is it really just been a small sampling that have really tried it at this point?
So that's a great question. I've actually never heard that, but it's a misconception. So we're not worried about the quality of the blood. So if you're not aware, when you donate blood, your blood then gets tested very thoroughly with a whole panel of tests to ensure that it's safe and healthy before it is put into the general blood population to help, whoever may need it. And your stress levels and things do not affect the quality of your blood, but they do affect your willingness to come in and donate. And most importantly, they affect your willingness to come in and donate multiple times. What we see is people that have adverse reactions, they're a one and done, right? They come in, they got really anxious, they hated the feeling of the needle, they are never coming in again. So we need to make sure we help them on that first time.
Yeah, you want to have a good definite first impression, and hopefully continue throughout their lives. Most definitely. Yeah, and also please send out a link or information on the World Donor Day in Brooklyn. People can try it out. They can go do this at the center. Jason had a question. Has there been any expansion beyond HoloLens that could use other pass-through headsets like Quest Pro, and they might also have eye tracking capabilities?
Yeah, great question. So the key thing for us with the HoloLens, and this is a Quest Pro, but like I mentioned, the key thing with the HoloLens is that it allows you to see a person's eyes, right? And it makes that very easy. And that was really key for the phlebotomist, because that's like, if you're having an adverse reaction, you're about to faint, what the phlebotomist is looking at is your eyes. And so with the Quest Pro, even though it's mixed reality, you can't see the donor's eyes at all. There is some side view, but the front view is quite impossible. And so with like more advancements, we could look at having the device auto recognize whether the donor is having a reaction. And that could really open up the ability to use a whole array of headsets But as of now, the HoloLens has really been the one that has fit the bill.
Oh yeah, you're not getting you're not. I mean, none of these headsets have like EEGs or other sensors on it at this point to check to see like internally how they're doing. So you really need to be able to see the person, is what you're saying, to see how they're doing on there and if there's any adverse things going on there. Besides obviously speaking. Any other questions? Oh, what about different settings? Like, are you? Could people use this experience? The first experience, like, can they try it out at home by themselves or a different location, or is it only available at the blood donation center?
Great question. So functionally, it functions anywhere, and we've had to test it in all sorts of corporate, boardrooms and meeting rooms and things like that. But it's meant to be used sort of commercially and will be available commercially to blood centers to help them to donate blood. So if you do want to try this, you're going to have to go donate blood, which is kind of the point.
Definitely, yeah, and comment from Peter, who is a neurosurgeon and complex spine surgeon. He specializes in robotic and AR assisted neurosurgery. He uses the Excelsius GPS robot and Augmented X Vision AR headset. So maybe you want to talk to him about it. I know all Augmented is specifically designed, I believe, for spinal surgeries. But I'm sure he can give your contact and give it with him.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Abbott does quite a bit with extended reality in the surgery space, past what I'm talking about here. So yeah, happy to connect there on what we're doing.
Nice. I have if you could put your info in the chat, Miguel, that would be great as well, so we could reach out.
Absolutely, I will do.
Barry, I have a question. May I ask it?
Of course. Go for it.
So yeah, you kind of touched on it, but would you are you planning on implementing this experience onto iOS, like maybe as a marketing tool to get people to try it out before going out to a center to test out the real thing?
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. I think, again, the advantage that we have is being able as Abbott to work with all of these big partners like Apple, Microsoft, and people like that. So, I know we've talked to them before, and obviously the blood donation cause is something that a lot of people are willing to help out in and be involved in. So I could definitely see us doing a whole variety of things in that realm in the future.
Nice. Are you guys working towards FDA approval for the experience?
So the great thing is, based on the way that we use it and the situations that it's being used in, it does not have to go through FDA clearance. It is considered a wellness device and not a medical device. And so we would not have to submit it to the FDA unless we started making certain claims around it affecting you and some.
Nice. That's great. Amazing. Well, it was a really nice experience. Barry, any other questions we have?
No, but I mean, I know Abbott's doing well. I mean, just personally, I know Abbott does a lot of stuff in the diagnostic space. Of course, many of our COVID tests came from Abbott. So are you also creating experiences for those type of diagnostics, like I don't know, flu tests or strep or other home type of testing as well?
So not particularly on the testing side, but I will tell you that when we were developing Abbott's COVID tests, we used mixed reality to connect the teams and train engineers on how to create the solutions. So like I mentioned, Abbott is using this technology in a whole host of ways, but even in that case with COVID, mixed reality played a key role in getting those tests developed, manufactured, and out the door.
That's neat. That's really great. Awesome. Thank you, Miguel, for joining.
Thank you all so much.
Awesome. Next, I'm excited to have Dr. Bob Crockett here with us. Dr. Crockett is the co-founder at HaptX. an incredible haptics company, and I look forward to learning more about your work and research in the space. Thank you for joining.
Great, thank you. It's great to be here. I will share my screen and start a presentation. I pulled together a couple of slides that I've shown before at different forums. I would encourage you to stop me in real time if you want to explore any particular area a little bit deeper through the chat. If you break in, that's fine. And I'll stick around as long as anybody else is willing to stick around, so we can have some good interactive questions at the end. So let's get this thing started. I'll load up my PowerPoint presentation. And boom. So I'm going to be talking about natural haptics. That's our thing. So HaptX has taken the road that is sometimes tough to travel, but it's really important to us, of creating haptics, of the sense of touch in virtual reality or any mixed reality, really, that feels like you're actually contacting an object. And that's really important. And it's important to talk about what that really means, because you know, it's one thing to talk about your iPhone and getting a sensation that is haptics, but that sort of buzzing, that low displacement vibration is easy to implement, but it just doesn't feel natural. So that's the key word in this presentation, and that's been our road that we've traveled for about 10 years now, and it's a complex system that we'll talk about, but it's what you need to do. So what I mean by natural interaction is really it's avoiding being a ghost, and our focus right now in the early adopters is virtual reality, high-end simulation and training. And you know, these are companies that are customers. They've been in VR. They've never left VR. They've been in VR for 20 or 30 years, some of them. And although everybody recognizes the real benefit of being able to have a virtual environment for high-end simulation and training, design work, those sort of applications, the problem is you're a ghost. And you know, we're human. We want to reach out and interact with that amazing virtual world that you see. And so if you really want to be able to reach out and touch an object, feel like what you see, it involves two main components to it. And that's a sense of tactile sensation and also a sense of force feedback. So tactile is when you contact an object and your skin actually has to be depressed by quite a bit. You know, we're squishy as humans, and that means that in order to truly trigger the nerves that you have below the surface of your skin, even at the fingertips, you have to press in by over a millimeter. So you really do have to push down far for your body to really respond in a way as if you were touching a solid object. So that's one dimension of touch, is being able to push pretty far into your skin at a high enough pixel density, or a touch pixel density, that it feels like you're contacting any object that you see in virtual reality. The other component is force feedback. And so that's in that previous slide of reaching out and grabbing a coffee mug. It's not enough just to feel the surface of the object. You have to prevent your hand from going through it. Otherwise, you'll continue to feel like a ghost. It'll be a mismatch between what you expect and what your body feels. So you need some way to actually physically stop your hand from going through a virtual object. And really, those two dimensions are important. They work together. You can't separate them and have a satisfying experience. And what's really interesting, you know, what we found early on is that the human body, we've evolved to fill in missing pieces of information really well. So as long as you're above a certain level of believability for haptic experience, your brain will fill in missing pieces of the puzzle. You know, it's really interesting. You'd think that you need a higher resolution of those tactile pixels that we have in order to get something that feels like touching any arbitrary surface. You don't need as high a resolution as you might think, because if it's good enough, your brain will fill in missing pieces of information. We actually have had a number of people in our demos talk about how they felt the warmth of this little tiny deer that we have running around on your hand. And that's just not true. We don't have any thermal in our gloves. But if your brain is above that level of believability, it's your best friend. It's our best friend. It means that the system, any of the limitations of the hardware system, can be overcome by your brain. But the opposite is true as well. If you're below that level of believability, your brain is just going to rebel against it. It's going to feel uncanny, unnatural, and it's just not going to be a satisfying experience. So it's been our whole goal, it's been our whole mission to create something that is above that bar that really tricks your body into thinking that you are touching a virtual object. And this is the system. You can go, if you haven't seen it online, you can go take a look at it on your own time. It's out there, it's been out there for a number of years in the form of a development kit. And we have an upcoming product that is more of a widespread commercial product that's coming out a little bit later. But our whole system is based on pneumatics. So I mentioned that humans are squishy. And if you're going to trick the brain into thinking that you're touching something, you have to push in quite a ways. And you can see in that little GIF image that this is each individual, essentially balloons. We have 133 of these individual balloons. What you're seeing in that image is what's on the fingertip, and they inflate to they're independent channels, so they're all really proportionally controlled based on a system that runs under Unity or Unreal. It runs off of the same physics engine that controls the VR headset. We're taking the raw physics from there, converting it into pressures, and then providing the correct stimulation pattern to your finger. That's the touch part. On the back of the hand, we have a series of essentially tendons that physically stop your hand from going through an object. So it's a complex system. An engineer in their right mind wouldn't choose to use pneumatics if they didn't have to, because it involves a lot of air, a lot of tubes, a lot of sources for leaks. It's a heavy system that has to be engineered to a light system. It's an expensive system that we have to make as inexpensive as possible. It's a fragile system that we have to make robust. So it's been a challenge to get this into a form factor at a price point that we can really get it out to market. But we haven't been willing to compromise on the quality. And right now, and of course, we keep our eye open for any new actuator technology out there. And pneumatics really are the only way that we believe can provide that level of not only detail, but natural sensation. So it is what it is. Our product is not intended for consumer use. That's not our target market right now. As the technology matures and as it evolves, price will keep coming down. But for right now, our market really is the industrial use for high-end simulation and training, and also design, like vehicle design, where you really want to not only see a virtual reality view of the interior of a new car, but you want to be able to reach out there and touch it and do ergonomic studies and feel what it feels like to close the glove box, for example. So that's our market. I can show you just, out of a number of different possible individual market segments, medical is a big one. We just heard from Abbott, and we are working with a number of different medical device companies, as well as the U.S. military and Mayo Clinic and a number of different medical groups, to use this sort of combination of virtual reality and very high-end haptics to do medical training. So if you can actually not only go through a procedure in a virtual environment, but touch a patient, and moreover, not only any patient, but the software change the disease state, the patient morphology, the size, age, gender, all of that sort of stuff for the patient. It really has a payoff in being able to immerse somebody to a level where the training is very, very effective, much more effective than just using a mouse or a controller to click through a procedure. And now where we're going at this point, we started out with individual users in a virtual environment, and that is fine, but that's not really where we're headed. I think that it's really important to note that collaboration along the lines of people being human, it's really important to us, as it is to our industrial customers, to get multiple people in a common environment and have them work together in a haptic environment. So this could be designing a car in a common environment. There's some early video from early experiments we have. We actually at CES showed a Jenga game, which was kind of fun. But it also reinforced the fact that as humans, when we had people come into this Jenga environment, they would work together to try to push out the little blocks and have fun for a while. But as Jenga is in the real world, it kind of loses your interest after a short while. And inevitably, people would start thumb wrestling with each other and giving each other high fives, because it's that level of human connection that is fundamental. And so I think that's really where this type of technology is evolving, is not just an isolated virtual environment, but a multi-user collaborative environment. Another area that is evolving rapidly is telerobotics. And this is something that we didn't plan on doing, just kind of came together because
there we go.
Here, let me turn down the sound so I can
nice to meet
talking
you.
without. We put together a bunch of pieces. So the user, the teleoperator, is using a virtual reality headset and our gloves. At the other end, at the remote side, are a pair of industrial robotic arms with a very sophisticated anthropomorphic hand created by Shadow Robotics and some very fancy sensors on the robot hand. And there's a stereoscopic camera that you can see on the telerobot system. And so when the user is looking through that, it has a wide enough field of view that you can look around and see what the robot sees. When you move your arms out, the robot's moving its arms out. You really truly feel embodied in that robot. And that means that at a really complex procedure like teleoperation, because there's a learning curve, we've showed this at a number of trade shows, and people just walk up, put on the gloves, and they can control a robot because you're not doing anything different. When that robot is when you are moving your hand and reaching out, and the robot's following you, when the robot contacts an object, it could be an egg, for example, you feel that egg in our gloves, and so you know exactly how much pressure to put onto it to pick it up without having it slip or break. We have examples where we have people doing Rubik's cubes and taking money out of a wallet and actually using a box cutter. And anytime you have an open box cutter on a conference floor with people coming through and having it controlled by a robot, it's a little dicey. But again, it's that sense of natural touch that makes it all just work. I want to make sure that we have time to answer any kind of questions, so I'll just kind of blast through these last slides just to get you thinking about where this is all headed. And I do want to point out that the hands are super important for obvious reasons for haptics, but you could have a perfect haptic glove, a perfect representation of touch in a virtual environment, and it wouldn't be sufficient. Gloves on their own can't pull your hands down to simulate something that has mass, that has a large enough weight. You can't lean up against a virtual wall without falling over if you're just wearing a pair of gloves. So the next logical step is to have some sort of robotic system, a simplified exoskeleton that connects the gloves to a ground point. So you can provide that level of true simulation of mass and solidity. And then eventually, you get to something that's been described a number of times in different science fictions of a whole body apparatus where you strap yourself into it. And that's what got me involved with when Jake Rubin, who was all 20 years old, he's the co-founder of this company, came to me and painted this picture of a machine that you strap yourself into, put the headset on, and you can't tell whether you're in virtual reality or real reality. And so that is where this whole technology is headed for a particular high-end application that we're going to stick with, where you can provide forces and torques and temperature and pressure across the body in a high enough resolution that you really can simulate any type of reality. So I think I'm going to leave it with that and make sure that we have time to answer any kind of questions. I'll stop my sharing, and I appreciate the time that I've had to give you a glimpse of what we're up to and where we're headed.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. A few questions here. What are your thoughts on how people are interacting with the smartphones of today?
Yeah, so I try not to talk about our technology as it's better than other haptic technologies. The neat thing about haptics is there's room for everybody. And what you see on an iPhone and what you see, there's a number of gloves out there that have a similar type of technology. it's a high frequency, low displacement. So it's either an eccentric motor, offset motor, or linear resonator or piezoelectric. And that's the sort of thing that you have in your phone. They're solid state devices, so they're pretty easy to integrate into a glove, but they don't give you that really high displacement that you need. And so we call that symbolic haptics. It lets you know that something is going on. But when you're pushing on an iPhone, it doesn't really feel, you know that something's going on. It's a good cue, and there's absolutely a place for it, but it doesn't feel like a button. And so that's the challenge. That's what we've been working very hard to overcome. And I think that as haptics as an industry continues to evolve along with AR and VR and mixed reality, you're going to find that there is no best technology. You're going to find that different technologies at different price points are very well suited for different types of use cases.
Awesome. Thank you. In your opinion, what is in your knowledge, what is the value of the sense of touch versus the other senses?
So my feeling about it is that every time you add a sense, it's not linear, it's exponential. The amount of immersion goes up exponentially. And so when you add touch to any kind of virtual reality environment, it dramatically increases it. Then of course, if you add the multiple dimensions of touch, I already talked about the tactile and force feedback. We also have technology demonstrations that have thermal. So the sensation of being able to differentiate different objects by different materials, by how they take heat out of your body. And each time you add one of those dimensions of sensation, the immersion level goes dramatically up. And again, it's what I mentioned before, is that the brain is really great at filling in missing pieces of information. The more pieces that you have for the brain to work with, the more it'll paint a complete picture. So super, super important.
Amazing. Have you attempted to add haptics onto other areas aside from hands?
So yeah, I mean, we have hapticized all sorts of things over here in the lab. It's, as a startup company, building a complex product, it's always a balance between what you'd like to do. We would certainly like to do all sorts of really wacky stuff with haptics, but you got to find your market. You've got to build products along the way to get to that end vision of a Ready Player One type of rig, or however you want to describe it, that ultimate machine. And gloves at a price point that really is geared towards the enterprise market is the right fit, we believe, for doing that sort of bootstrap. So being able to provide a really important business tool to companies that can afford it in the short term is a means to an end. It's not the end point. We do see the same technology. We chose it specifically because it could be scaled over the entire body, and we're working on that.
Amazing. Regarding implementation, what is how do you develop for your device?
So as I mentioned, it all runs, our software development kit runs on Unity or Unreal. And so anybody who can develop any content with those platforms, it already is 99% of the way there. So for objects, for surfaces that are pre-existing in Unity, for example, you don't have to do anything to make it haptic ready. It works on the underlying physics engine. And so when there's a collision, when there's a contact, we pull all the information from those game engines to run our system. The only thing you need to do to really make it fully haptic and fully interactive would be to add the articulations for like if you have an indent knob and you want it to have a certain clicky pattern, you have to do those sort of work, but there's no extra layer that's required to make it haptics ready.
Wow, amazing. Is there an object that's like too small to feel? Like if there was a cube so small, would the haptic, would it not be recognized by the glove? Yeah, so back to immersion, our resolution with 133 individual channels on the hand, that means that you have about 12 or so of these pixels per finger.
And if you look at the biomedical research, there's a term that's called the 2-point threshold, where if you hold two needles and bring them closer together and poke them into your skin, at some point you won't be able to distinguish them as individual points. And that's actually quite small. Your fingertips have very high tactile resolution. So our pixel density isn't anywhere near that. But because, again, this exponential factor of adding the right visual cues with the tactile cues, you don't need to get nearly to that level. So I'd say that, you know, one of the things that we have in a demo is a spider that runs across your hand, and you can feel its individual legs. And of course, a spider leg is a much smaller resolution than any one pixel. But because of the visual cueing and the level of immersion, even something that visually is shown as very, very small, certainly, you know, a couple hundred microns, something that's real small, that's represented by a balloon that is up to a millimeter in diameter, it works. You don't notice that level of disconnect.
That's incredible. It seems like an incredible experience. And then just one more question. And Sander in his talk was saying that the visual sense is extremely strong, and through augmented reality, you really get a sense of that the object is really there. I was wondering what are some common things that you hear against haptics, and how do you stay focused on your company's goal?
Yeah, so we're hardware providers. We do content as needed to support our demos, but it's really our customers who are providing the use cases. And again, these are companies that have been around VR for a long time, so they know what they want. And because they're experienced with VR, they know what they're missing too. And for these customers, that sense of touch, especially in simulation and training, is what they need. And so we're not really trying to evangelize haptics as the solution for virtual reality. We don't have the ability to introduce a product to a wide enough market to say that. We're providing some very important hardware that fills in missing pieces for high-end simulation and training. And there's lots of studies that show that VR training with controllers or with a mouse or some other input device, in many cases, actually counter training. It's negative training. It's worse than if you didn't do that training at all, because you might have a perfect visual field. But if you're learning to fly a plane by using controllers and pointing to different buttons, you're not building the muscle memory, and that can actually be detrimental. So that, you know, the use cases are there for the people who need it now. And I think that as the price point comes down, as companies like ours start doing other innovative things with other types of haptic technologies, I do believe that haptics will kind of be the missing piece of the puzzle that will make people want to stay in a virtual environment longer. You know, mixed reality is a little bit different beast, but when you're in VR, it kind of becomes a novelty after a while if it's just visual. We're tactile creatures. We want to reach out and touch that fish that's swimming by, and that's part of the joy that can be provided by a virtual environment.
Yep. And Peter made a comment here. He wants to mention AR's tactical sensation tech has been very helpful for surgical residents and medical students learning surgery without fear of messing up. Yeah. And you mentioned you had experience with that in your presentation, right?
Yeah, that's right. And there's some really good hardware out there that's more special purpose for dental, for surgical applications. What we're really trying for with our glove is something that's a general purpose device that can be used well across a number of different industries.
Have you tried implementing your technology into augmented reality as well as virtual reality?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And we've been so focused on VR. What we have done fairly recently is just internally and with a couple of key customers who have specific use cases for that, demonstrate that it works with HoloLens. It works. The fundamental hardware interaction is compatible with a wide range of different headsets. So yes, it can be done. The question is what do you get out of doing it? We have some real interest in working. Of course, you're seeing the gloves. Our gloves are getting smaller, and so there's kind of a looking for the right fit between what you really need to do in AR that you can't do in VR, and where our glove comes in. And right now, medical again is quite promising in that particular area for early adopters.
Amazing. Great. Thank you, Bob, so much for joining us. It was nice having you here.
That was great to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, appreciate everyone for joining. If there's any other questions, feel free to put in the chat. We'll stick around for a few more minutes. Thank you, Jason, for joining as well. It was great having you. Let's see. Hey, Jason, on the I forgot the name. So basically, you could just upload a 3D scan onto Unity and enable that that plugin, and then you can simulate that environment without having to test it. Sorry, I forgot the name of these different plugins, so it's hard to explain.
Polycam is the name of the app that you use to create the scan.
Okay, cool.
And if you have a LiDAR enabled device, so an iPhone Pro or an iPad Pro would also work, relatively recent vintage, then it scans with relatively high resolution. If you don't have one of those, then it uses photogrammetry. So what you're doing is taking a bunch of photos and then it assembles them into the shape. So you can do it with both devices.
What was the Unity component called that you added onto the mesh?
Oh, that's just called simulation environment.
And with that, the scan works identical to the simulated environments provided in AR Foundation?
Yeah, so well, yes-ish. If the thing that you created to scan with creates a mesh, then it will work just fine. Yes.
Wow.
Which most of them that do that do that. So
that's a really great feature, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, you could scan literally any space. You could scan your inside of your car or your office, your kitchen, your medical theater, whatever. You could scan those things and create quick 3D models of them for testing purposes.
Wow, very nice. And then in real life, the augmented reality experience will function pretty much the same.
Yep.
Right. Wow. That's really neat. Amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a simulated environment, and that's on AR Foundation, right? I'm gonna look that up.
Yep. Simulation environment is the name of the component.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, amazing. Bob, do you work in Unity yourself?
No, I'm about as much of a non-software person as you can get, a non-creative person. I'm a biomedical engineer and mechanical engineer. I like the hardware stuff. I leave it to our very talented staff to figure out all the magic that happens with all the mechanical gear.
That's smart. I like that. How do you and your team like working with Unity versus Unreal versus like Lens Studio and all that?
Yeah, I because I'm not the one who's using it on a daily basis, I wouldn't be able to go into the details. But I do know that from everything I understand is that they really each have their own space, and our customers use both Unity and Unreal. I don't think there's any overriding direction to one or the other, because our customers span the gamut from military and aerospace to automobile designers to train operators, and
That's great.
And so I think there's a real mix out there, and because at the end of the day, it's all physics based. From our perspective, it's wonderful because people can choose the interface that they like the most, but the guts still run very similar.
Interesting. That's really neat. Have you done any? Thank you, Greg, for joining. Thank you, Dave. Have you done any work with optics, or that's like a totally different arena than haptics? It's like a whole different thing.
Yeah, no, that's not. No.
Right. Yeah, I'm just wondering the crossover. I'm on the software side and don't really know much about hardware.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That's yeah. And you also you're a professor at Cal Poly State University as well.
Yep, here in San Luis Obispo. Yeah.
Wow, that's really what classes do you teach there?
Well, I'm actually quite excited because I'm on sabbatical now, and before that I was in academic administration for a long stretch. So I'm going back in the fall to just be a plain old professor to teach, and that's coming full circle to me. And I'm really excited to actually kind of share some stuff that I learned. So the classes. The classes I really enjoy teaching are the ones that are the intersection of engineering and business. So I teach a class in biomedical entrepreneurship. I'm going to teach a class in disruptive technologies. The sort of things that I remember got me really excited about engineering was always that forward-looking type class where it kind of the big picture engineering. So don't come to me asking about thermodynamics, but if you want to talk about entrepreneurship and how biomedical engineers have a role to play in that, then I'm your guy.
Wow, that's really cool. It's a great school as well, so it's really neat. I'm sure the course is great. Awesome. Well, thank you, Bob, for joining.
Yeah, I have to head off now. It's been wonderful, this opportunity to talk to you all. I appreciate it. You can find me on LinkedIn. My email is just bob@haptx.com. When you're a co-founder, you get one of the OG emails, so it's easy to remember. Feel free to reach out and continue the conversation.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And Jason, appreciate you being here as well. And with that, we will we'll probably start signing off for the night. So thank you. Yeah.
Thanks everybody.
Yeah. Thanks for being part of the New York Augmented Reality Meetup this evening. Have a good night.
So we got some applause, Andy. Round of applause. Signed off.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you. Still here. Good to meet you. Okay, sound like it.